Welcome to In the Know. I am your host, Tony Reeves. How many of us have suffered through a situation that we did not necessarily have to suffer through? What I mean is, looking at your circumstances that you were in, if you were in a position where you could have avoided suffering, how many of you actually chose to suffer anyway? In today's chapter, I'm going to talk to you about one of the earliest times when I chose to suffer through a situation alone that I did not necessarily have to suffer through. So in chapter 3 of Life After College, the title of this chapter is called Choosing to Suffer Alone, Part 1. So soon after graduating from college and having to check out of my dorm room, I got my first job as a telemarketer. And this job seemed easy enough. I had to report to work at 7:30 and the day ended at 4. I had a 15-minute break in the morning, 30-minute break for lunch, and a 15-minute break in the afternoon. And since two of my good friends got hired for the same job, I not only did not have to do the job alone, but since both of my friends had cars and I did not, I also had reliable transportation to and from work. So for a job I only had to do for a month, I felt that I was in pretty good shape. And the first week of that job went very smoothly. Since the job was about 30 minutes away, my friends would alternate driving us to work. We would get on the road about 6:45 in the morning and arrive there at about 7:15 with time to spare. Lunchtime was great because we would go to this local fast food place that was right across the street, get something to eat, and be back in less than 10 minutes. Like I said, pretty smooth. However, the second week took a very different turn. Why do you say? Both of my friends decided to quit. However, I decided to stay. So now, since I had no car and my friends were no longer working, and so therefore I didn't have any source of transportation, I was faced with 3 difficult situations. Number 1, getting to work. Number 2, getting lunch. Number 3, getting home. And since I made the choice to stay at the job, despite not having a car, I felt it was my responsibility to face these 3 situations alone. I didn't want to bother my friends or my fraternity brothers or inconvenience anyone by asking them to give me a ride to work. So even though I had friends and frat brothers who had cars, I chose not to ask for a ride. So now I am faced with having to deal with each of these 3 situations alone. Now the first situation was pretty self-explanatory. How was I going to get to work? Now, fortunately, there was the bus, but unfortunately, I had never taken the bus to work. See, when I was riding with my friends, it was easy. I didn't have to worry about leaving my place till 6:45. However, after doing a little bit of research, in order for me to get to work at 7:30, I had to choose between 2 different bus routes. The 6 a.m. normal bus route, which took about an hour and 15 minutes to arrive at the bus stop by my job, or the 6:30 a.m. express bus, which took 50 minutes to arrive at the bus stop at my job. So I decided on the first day of having to travel without my friends and without a car, I'm going to go ahead and get on the 6:30 bus. What's there to miss? It's 6:30. It's an express bus. It gets me there in 50 minutes. All I have to do is get up an extra 15 minutes early. No problem. Except one. My job and the bus stop that was close to my job was not close. See, even though I thought it got me there quicker, I didn't realize that the bus stop that was by my job was not close to my job at all. It was actually about 2.5 to 3 blocks away. This meant whenever I took the 6:30 a.m. bus, I would arrive at about 7:20. As a result, I would have to run from the bus stop to get to my job, to get through the door, to get in the seat, sit down, have the headphones on, and log in to start my day. And doing this was stressful because I would always make it to my desk and log in right exactly at 7:30. Now see, I tried this a couple of times, and after having the stress of not being sure if I was going to make it to my desk on time every time, I decided to go with the 6 a.m. bus. Now, the 6 a.m. bus was a little slower in terms of routes and in terms of extra stops. But see, the upside of it is that it got me to the bus stop at 7:10. So this way, instead of me having to run to my job, I could just take a leisurely walk. The downside was that I was now going to have to be at the bus stop at 5:45 in the morning. And the reason I had to get there at 5:45 was because sometimes the bus actually got there a few minutes early. And if that bus got there early, no one was there, they were gone. Which then brings me to my second situation. Once I get to work, how am I getting lunch? Because I was riding the bus, I didn't feel comfortable bringing a lunch with me. So I relied on the fact that I could go across the street to a local fast food place that me and my buddies went to when the three of us were all working together. See, however, that was a problem because when I was riding with my friends in their car, we could just drive across the street, get our food, eat, and even leisurely talk to each other before we had to go back on the clock. But now, I don't have a car. Since I don't have a car, I got to cross one of the busiest intersections in a major metro city to get to the only fast food place within walking distance of where I work. And let me tell you, it would take about 10 minutes to get across that busy street, another 5 to 10 minutes to order the food and get the food, and then another 5 to 10 minutes to get back. And there were many days where I was running across the street to grab something to eat and get back so I could eat it and be back on the clock at the end of that 30 minutes. Which now brings me to the third and final difficult situation. How am I getting home? As I said before, I got off work at 4. Unfortunately, the earliest bus that I could take was 4:30. So by the time I boarded the bus, got through all the stops, I would not pull into my final stop until around 6 o'clock at night. So in essence, my work day started at 5:45 in the morning when I first got to the first bus stop, and did not end until 6 p.m. that evening when I got off that last bus stop. Now, when I reflect back on that time, I know it would have been easy for some of us to say, oh, this guy was just grinding. Or there are going to be people who do this all the time, so what are you complaining about? Or this is just a necessary step that you had to do in order to wait for your other job to start. And all of those things would be correct. But that's not the biggest reflection. The biggest reflection is that I had people in my orbit who could have made that transportation issue for me much easier, but I never bothered to ask. Even though my buddies decided to quit the job, there was nothing keeping them from giving me a ride occasionally every now and then if I asked, but I did not. And I had plenty of frat brothers and other friends in the area who could have easily given me the ride to work or even picked me up, but I didn't ask. And considering I already knew I was going to do the job for a couple more weeks, it would have not been a huge inconvenience if I would have just opened my mouth and said something. But guess what? I did not ask. In my mind, since I made the decision to choose to stay at this job, I told myself that I needed to accept all the consequences that came with it, on my own, by myself, without any help. So in the end, I made the decision that I had to deal with this by myself. And that is exactly what happened. I dealt with it by myself, even though there were plenty of resources available to me and this was causing so much stress on me. So the next time you decide to suffer through a situation, ask yourself the question, are there people or resources in your life that can help you avoid your suffering? Or have you just convinced yourself that you have to suffer alone, even when you do not have to suffer alone? And most of us will suffer many times when we do not have to suffer. And for me, it did not take long for me to choose to suffer alone again. When I quit this telemarketing job and found myself breezing through my summer job, I then found myself in the unique position of wanting to suffer alone. And when did this time come again? When I decided to take the Greyhound bus trip back to my home state, which was a 24-hour bus ride. Thanks again for tuning in for another edition of In the Know. Make sure you tune in for any upcoming episodes that we have. I am Tony Reeves, and as always, I want you to be in the know.